Well, good evening, one and all, in the wonder of Facebook Live and of YouTube. Welcome to the Studio Rats Q&A live with us this evening, that way, all the way from Los Angeles. Please welcome Mr. Steve Genewick.
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on our evening of craziness.
Early afternoon.
Yeah, stop showing off. As always, we have a plethora of questions and things to get us going. I've known Steve for donkeys. We can talk about Mix with the Masters and Paul won't know.
He wasn't there.
He wasn't there.
I'm not invited.
No, that's why. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have any questions out there, add them to your, if you're on YouTube or Facebook, you can add them to your comments, that type of thing. We get them all in here. Good evening, Mr. Ayton. Great to have you with us. So, Steve, tell us how things are in sunny California, other than just being sunny. How are you with lockdown? How's work? All that sort of stuff.
We're pretty much still in lockdown here in LA. Some stuff is starting to open, but everybody's being really careful about it. A lot of the commercial studios have reopened to a point. Everybody's obviously there's masks and hand sanitizers and temperature taking and all that good stuff going on. Capitol is a soft open. We've done some sessions. We're definitely staff in there mixing. The rest of the building is empty. The office building part of it is empty and will be for a while. And other than that, I'm still set up in my living room. When this all went down, I grabbed as much gear as I could fit in my car one day, and because I knew I had some projects coming up. So I grabbed speakers and stuff, and I actually set up a 7-1 room in my living room. My wife was kind enough and said, nobody's coming over and you got to work, so take the living room. So we moved furniture out of the way, and I set up a 7-1 system, and I can mix 7-1. I've done some video game stuff. I can mix Dolby Atmos here. Although I don't have height speakers, I can get pretty close on an Atmos mix. And then nothing I do here gets turned in until I can listen to it in a real Atmos room, of which I have a few available to me and have had through this whole thing, where I could, rooms that weren't being used, where I could slide in myself and listen to mixes for a day and then come home.
So what are you doing?
We should. Sorry, mate.
Are you sort of getting like the rough mix together where you are, and then you're going over to Capitol to the Atmos room there, and then sort of doing all the tweaks? I'm mixing. I'm getting like 90% here at home. Yeah, it's all in the box. So I bring my boot drive, and I have all the software, and I just pop it up, and I wouldn't suggest it if you've never as getting into Dolby Atmos. Considering I've done literally hundreds of mixes, it wasn't that hard for me to go, okay, if I put that up there, it's probably going to sound like this. I do hear it here because my system folds down what I put in the height speakers. It drops it into my, 7-1 system. So it's not like I'm not hearing anything. I'm just not hearing it where it's supposed to go. But I'm pretty good at guessing, and then, like I said, I can go to the room and tweak it a little bit. There's always a few little tweaks once you get. I'm not in a treated room either, so there's all that kind of, we do our best.
I feel now we have some of the listening public joining us. We should actually introduce you properly. Steve, you are recording engineer, mixing engineer, primarily based at Capitol. Is fair to say?
Fair to say, yeah. I've been a staff engineer at Capitol for 26 years now.
Blimey, you get less for manslaughter.
Yep, should have done that.
I put 15 years in the introduction, so I messed that completely up.
No, it's 15 years working alongside friend, mentor of mine, and the amazing Al Schmidt. Is that right? 15 years?
Yeah, it's actually probably closer to 20 at this point. Luckily, my daughter redid the bio on my website this year, so.
And currently you're writing the handbook on mixing in what I am going to call Dolby Atmos, and you're going to call Dolby Atmos all evening.
The whole time, yeah. I was kind of the first guy to hop in for music. For films, it's been a thing for a long time, and if we want to get in deeper with that, what we've been doing for music is a lot different than what the guys do in film. Not that they're wrong; they're absolutely right with what they're doing, but it works a little bit different with music only content. So You can see which rabbit hole you want to go down with that.
I'm going to tell the story of how Steve and I met, because it's incredibly embarrassing for me, and I shall probably glow, but it always makes me smile when I tell it as a story. We were at NAMM, what, 7 years ago?
No idea, at least.
Something like that. And I get a text. Hi, James, it's Steve. Want to meet for a beer? And I'm like, someone said beer. Of course I'm going to turn up. I don't know who Steve is. I have no idea who random Steve is. So I think, yeah, okay, we're going to be in the Marriott pool bar or something. Come and find me. Guessing you know who I am, sort of type text back. So anyway, I'm over in the Hilton bar, which is, for anyone who's not been to NAMM, there are two hotels that are opposing across a kind of courtyard. And the Marriott is one side and the Hilton's the other. Anyway, I'm over at the Hilton bar. I've just fallen off the thing. Come on, there we go. I'm at the Hilton bar. My phone goes again. Hi, it's Steve. I'm at the Marriott bar. Where are you? And I'm like, sorry, Steve. I'm at the Hilton over the road. Okay, I'll come and find you. And I'm starting to think I've got a stalker. I'm starting to think I've got an actual stalker. This is quite scary. I'm in a foreign land where they have guns and stuff. Anyway, I get another text. We've gone for a meal at a restaurant up the road. Hi, it's Steve. I'm in the Hilton, and I'm like, oh no! This poor guy is chasing me all over Anaheim. So sorry. We're at Roy's.
I was probably chasing 2 or 3 other people at the same time.
So we're at Roy's up the road. Come and join us. We've got a table. Come and join us for a drink, something to eat, whatever. So anyway, I'm with Rex and Joey and another couple of guys. This is before you used to come out. This is before you started coming, isn't it, Paul?
I think it was a year before I. Yeah.
And Steve walks in to introduce himself, and it's like, so Steve, what brings you to the craziness that is now? He says, "Oh, I'm a staff engineer at Capital," and the 5 of us, it was like drop the mic moment, kind of clang. We're all like, "Oh shit!" So, yeah, that's hence my embarrassing moment of having Steve chase me all over California.
And just
I remember your face when you asked me what I had been doing, and I had just done a record with Vinny.
Yes,
and I had done a record, and you were like, "Who's the drummer?" I was like, "I think it was Vinny," and you just like froze.
Yeah, proper. And every time I said, "Oh, I love that record," you said, "Yeah, we recorded it," and I'm like,
Yeah, it happened.
I think at the time, one of my favorite records was the Paul Anka Rock Swings album, and it's the who's who of great LA session players with Vinny Collier at drums.
Oh yeah, that was a great record. I loved it. That record. Was so much fun to do. I remember when Al and I, Paul had been a client for a while, and we had the session booked, and it was do a big band record with Paul. It'll be fun. It's all the guys, and Pat Williams is doing arrangements and all that. And I remember Al and I mixing something, and he came in one day. He was like, "So here's the deal with that Paul Anka thing." He's like, he's doing big band arrangements of like classic rock songs. And I was like, really? And he goes, yeah, they're going to send us a demo of one of them today. I'm like, all right, this sounds weird, but whatever. And they sent us just a mock-up of one of the songs. It might have actually been Teen Spirit. I don't remember which one it was.
Teen Spirit was the big show, the flag waver off that one, wasn't it?
Yeah. And but we had the little like synthy thing. And but he played it for us, and I remember Al and I going, well, it's either going to be really good or really bad. Like, there's no in between on this. And then when we got the band in and actually heard the arrangements, it was pretty kicking. Yeah, still a great record, great sounding record too. Yeah. It was really fun to do. I mean, I think we did the record in 3 days or something like that.
Wow.
But you can do that when you've got, the great and the good of the LA session circuit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You've got Vinny Collier on drums, who needs but one take.
Yeah, if that.
Yeah, if that.
Yeah. I mean, he's reading charts, so sometimes he takes a second to like, hang on, let me look at this first. But yeah, I mean, with those guys, it's 1 or 2 takes tops. I mean, you might go back and punch a little section, or we can't switch from woodwinds to horns this quick, so can we go back and punch that in? But we usually tell on a record date like that, if it's for something like that, we usually try to get, a song an hour. And that's like kind of done.
How many piece orchestra is this?
So that was a full big band. So, 5 saxes, 4 bones, 4 trumpets, and a rhythm section. So I think there's some strings on that record. We probably overdubbed the strings. I don't think we did the strings at the same time. And then Paul would do his vocals. We would overdub vocals, but he's 2 takes and we're done it. He sang the whole record in a day and a half or something like that. So, and then mixing, 4 or 5 songs a day mixing.
I did a guitar part today actually, and it took me half a day. So I don't think you'd be inviting me.
You just have to write it out and play it. You get Dean Parks. He does it in like 20 seconds.
Yeah, amazing.
It's like, we from this side of the Atlantic, we kind of watch people like Vinny, and Nathan East and Tim Pierce and those sort of guys, and we watch them on videos and go, oh, they're in the studio with you daily.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
So we can't.
I hope so.
Yeah.
When they can be, absolutely, it's really fun.
We've got our UK session guys. We've got some great guys over here, but the world-renowned guys are all on your doorstep.
Yes, usually coming through the doorstep. You guys have some fantastic musicians over there, by the way. I mean, every session I've ever done over there has been top-notch. So
hasn't worked with Studio Rats yet, mate.
You guys don't work at Abbey Road all the time?
No, sadly.
Not all the time. It'd be nice.
Abbey Close more than Abbey Road.
Yeah, there you go.
Just in case people don't know what Capitol Studios is, do you want to explain it? Because it's, obviously we know it because it's
right.
Probably the best studio in the world. But
I think so, personally.
Yeah.
I like to say I think it's the best studio in the world. There are places that do some things better than us, but I don't think there's any place that can do as much as we do at the level we do it at. So yeah, it's the historic round building in Hollywood that looks like a stack of records, Capitol Records. So we're the square part of that building. If you look at it, there is a square part. And we're kind of underground. You go down about 6 or 8 feet. So, and in the building, we've got 3 recording studios, 2 kind of proper, actually we have more than that now, 2 proper studios with control rooms and live rooms. And they're pretty big rooms. I mean, we get that big band in there, no problem. In Studio A. Studio B is a touch smaller. The interesting thing about them is they sit right next to each other, and we actually have a wall that opens up in between them. So we can use Studio A and Studio B together. If we do that, we can get about, we say 60, but 60 is pushing it. It's probably, 50. But actually, no, we can get 60 pretty easily. It depends on the instrumentation. These days, it's like 3, but that's COVID, But yeah, and we can do, we do all kinds of stuff. We can, when we have the wall open, we can drive from either control room or both. So Studio A has a big 88R that we put in brand new about 7 or 8 years ago now. Studio B has an 8068 that's been in there since the 70s. So a lot of times we'll patch stuff right into the 8068. It's just a big, huge rack of mic preamps to us, and we'll patch them back over. We have audio and fiber and all that, video and all that, all through the building. So we can patch from anything to anywhere. Also on the first floor, we have a big mix room, Studio C, which has a big Neve 88R in it. That's our flagship Atmos room now. So most of the time we don't use the console. We're bypassing it for Atmos. But at a flip of a button, we can switch back to all analog. And then we also have 4 or 5 mastering rooms. We've got Studio D on the second floor, which is kind of an overdub room. And now we have Studio E, which is our second mix room on the second floor, second Atmos mix room. And that's all in the box. It's got an S6 in there, and it's a really nice room.
A very beautiful custom-made S6, which we saw when we came over in January.
Mm-hmm. Nice. Exactly.
Very, very sweet room.
Yeah. We're actually thinking about bringing that S6 downstairs, but we'll see. We're always thinking about stuff. What actually happens and what we talk about is not quite the same. But
you're a staff engineer, aren't you, at Capitol? But you also freelance, don't you? So you also work at other studios and do other stuff. Mm-hmm. So how does that working relationship? How's the balance between you and Paula effectively?
Yeah, they're really good about if somebody wants me to go to another studio or what that looks like, they're really good about letting me do that kind of stuff. You know, obviously it started with Al when I was his assistant mainly, and you know, somebody wanted to work at another place and we would go together and do all that kind of stuff. But they've been, you know, really good about it. You know, I try to bring as much as I can to Capitol, but everybody knows that not every project can be done at one studio. Something, you know, whether it's budget or time or, you know, size. Sometimes, I mean, there's sessions we do that are way too big for Capitol. You know, you can't do a 100-piece orchestra there. You have to go to a bigger room. So yeah, they're really good about letting go. And there's other things that are budget constraints. So, you know, I've always had a small mix room here at my house. I mean, you guys have been here and seen the videos and all that. And that's for stuff that, you know, really can't afford Capitol, because not everybody can do that. And a lot of times what I'll try to do is blend the two together. You know, I'll get a band who wants to work with me and I'll say, look, let's spend the money and go to Capitol and cut the tracks. And then I'll mix it at my house. And that'll be much less expensive. But, you know, if I can cut the tracks at Capitol, mixing is so simple. You know, adding a little reverb and some balance and sending it out.
That's very cool. Very, very cool.
There's a question.
Well, I mean, sorry, mate. You go.
Do you want to go first?
No, so mine's potentially a quick one.
Okay.
It's between you on your own and you with Al, I suspect there probably isn't anyone out there that you haven't worked with the likes of trumpet player Arturo Sandoval, Barbara Streisand, Josh Groban, I said it, Mary J. Blige, Michael Bublé, you know, Chris Botti, Carole King, Neil Young, Paul Anka, Panic at the Disco, Paul McCartney, Robert Cray, Harry Connick, you know, everyone who's anyone is on that list.
Mm-hmm.
Except Studio Rats, but we'll work on that one. Is there anyone out there, again, besides the Studio Rats, that you haven't worked with that you'd like to?
I've never done anything with Springsteen. I think that'd be fun.
That'd be awesome, wouldn't it?
I never. Van Morrison was always on that list. Yeah, I mean, there's people I'd like to work more with.
Okay, that's an equally interesting list.
Yeah.
Who was so good that you think, do you know what, I could do that again? I could do more of that.
Well, I mean, it's always, you know, we have a lot of repeat clients. And I mean, there's always, you know, the ones that come back around. I mean, anytime, you know, you have a Beatle or somebody like that around, it's great. You know, working like the records we did with Dylan is so much fun to do. You know, I'd like to do more like recording stuff with the U2 guys. It's just, I mean, they're really nice guys. I've done some stuff with them, but never like a big project. Mm-hmm. And I've just heard the stories of how chaotic it is, and it sounds interesting. I may not want to do it again, but you know.
What did you do with U2? What was the project?
I've done some like interview stuff and live performance stuff, and I've actually done some Atmos mixing for them. I don't think anything has been released yet that I did. I don't know if it's going to be released. You know, a lot of the, especially early on, a lot of the Atmos stuff we were doing was kind of proof of concept. So, you know, can you mix this, and then we'll bring the band in and see if they like it, and we'll go on from there. And you know, sometimes they go, yeah, we do like it, and then they run off and do it by themselves or whatever. Mm-hmm. But they're really fun guys to hang out with.
I've got a question. Yeah. Well, there is a question. Yeah, there's a question from Mike, but just give me 2 seconds, because what is the best project that you've ever worked on? Because it sort of leads on from the last question.
The best project I've ever worked on?
Or your favorite project you've ever worked on?
Oh God. I mean, I always love working with Diana Krall. You know, we've done so many records together. Again, the McCartney records, the couple that we've done, great. The funniest day was we were starting one of the Bob Dylan records we were doing in Studio B, and we were supposed to have a setup day on Monday kind of deal and start recording Tuesday. And Al and I had been mixing this Beatles Grammy special, so it was a live performance of all Beatles songs and different people doing the Beatles song, you know, one of those kind of shows. And the last mix we had to do was Paul and Ringo. Like, so we had this mix on the console, and we didn't finish it in time. We were supposed to finish the Sunday, but it bled over on a Monday, and we were like, well, it's no big deal. We'll just leave it on the console, and when they get back to us, we'll make the changes. We'll be setting up for Bob in Studio B. It won't matter. And lo and behold, Bob showed up on that Monday. So suddenly setup day was record day. So we literally had Studio A, we had the Beatles on the console, and Studio B, we had Bob Dylan recording. It was pretty funny.
Amazing.
So those are, yeah. I mean, anytime you have somebody like that around, it's great. I mean, my favorite thing to do is like the more the merrier. The more people you put out in that room, the happier I am.
Really?
I love big, huge sessions. Yeah, I love the energy of it and the whole thing. It's great.
What's the worst thing that's gone wrong?
Oh, we used to have a saying, especially in the tape days, there's two kinds of engineers, those that have erased master tracks and those that will. So that feeling when you're in recording, you look down and you realize you're going over the take. Yeah.
Oh, awful,
yeah. Happened to me once.
Awful.
I did. Luckily, they got it. The one we were doing ended up better than the other one. So, but yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff. It's, I don't know that I've ever had a huge meltdown. Had power go out, stuff like that, but whatever.
Not your fault.
Yeah.
So Mike Ayton asks, he said, how is the approach of music mixing in Atmos different to film? What formats are music Atmos mixes being delivered on? Because Mike's a post guy.
So, I mean, when we'll take the second part, the formats, I assume he's talking about consumer playback. And
I think your deliverables, what are you outputting to, and how are you delivering it to?
Yeah, our deliverables are exactly the same as a film. So, I mean, we use the exact same tools. I mix straight into the RMU, create a .atmos file or an ADM file, and that's what gets sent. And then from there, it gets converted to an MP4 or whatever it is for streaming and all that kind of stuff. The approach and the way we use the tools, at least the way I do it, is much different. Really quick, we could spend hours on just how Atmos works, but really quick, you've got a bed, whether it's a 712 or a 714 or whatever your bed is, and your bed is, and this is very basic, but your bed is basically the speakers you have in your room, kind of. I mean, I think I explain it as, think of the bed as the speakers, and then you have objects, and objects are just a place in space, not necessarily a speaker. When you're mixing in films, you can be pretty confident that the theater you're mixing in is set up fairly properly. There's a left, center, right, there's sides, there's rears, there's overheads. It's a bit more controllable, even with home theaters and stuff like that. I discovered early on that using the bed had more of a chance of stuff shifting in the room where I didn't want it to go, depending on the playback system. And then we got into stuff like smart speakers and sound bars and all that kind of stuff that didn't have physical speakers. And again, it was like, okay, it's getting a little weird depending on how they set it up and all that kind of stuff. And I just realized early on that my mixes were way more stable in playback if I didn't use the bed. So I use almost exclusively objects in my mixing. And I have zones set up, we call them the object bed. So I have, 25 static objects that I can send into in different ways. I can also, by doing that, I can control where I put stuff outside of the panner a little bit easier. Again, all this stuff is really hard to describe. You kind of have to show it to you. But, and because we're mixing music, we're not tied to a screen and dialogue and all that kind of stuff. So we can be a little more adventurous with it sometimes. If you're in a movie, you don't necessarily want to hear a guitar coming out from behind you because it's distracting. It takes your focus away from the picture. But I don't have that. So my idea of mixing Atmos early on, right from the start, was, wow, they just built this room with 20 speakers in it. Let's see how much sound we can get to fill this room.
Yeah.
And it's not about being flashy and flying stuff around the room, although that is fun to do. And I mean, you guys have heard all the mixes we do, with that kind of stuff. But, we're still mixing a record. So like the song I'm mixing right now is a vocal, a little percussion, some bass, acoustic guitar, banjo. It's not, there's not a lot of stuff. There's nothing moving, first of all. And there's stuff coming out of all the speakers, but it's primarily, front loaded. It just doesn't lend itself to being too crazy, so I don't get crazy with it. The next song I'm gonna do today is a Beastie Boys track, and that I'll probably get crazy on.
Are you allowed to mute the banjo? Just for
I can, yeah. It only comes in one spot. Yeah.
That'd be fine. Yeah, that'd be fine. Just mute that there.
Exactly.
So is it fair to
Problem
say
if you mute the banjo, you hear the accordion.
So is it fair to say that the Atmos is a fairly big push from Universal Music at the moment? It's their big thing to get a consumer multi-channel format to be successful.
Absolutely, yeah. They've put a lot of money into it. Both Universal, Dolby, Warner Brothers is on now. Sony has their own system, but it's immersive. They're all streaming on Tidal and Spotify and all these places. So yeah, they're taking it pretty serious. It's not something we're playing around with. Put it that way.
Because you've been doing this now for a good couple of 3 years that I've known.
Yeah, we've got to be coming up on almost 4 years now that I've been doing it. And for the first 2 years, if you didn't know me or somebody at Capitol, you didn't hear it. There was no way to release this stuff. So we mixed for a good couple of years, just creating content before anything got released. Now I'm not sure how many songs are out there now. It's probably in the thousands.
Wow.
We're now starting to do albums, which is kind of fun. Doing complete albums. We're doing new releases now. So we've had a few records that were like simultaneous releases, where the Atmos and the stereo came out on the same day. So yeah, they're pushing it. There's some big companies putting some big money behind this, so hopefully it'll work. And in the playback too, Amazon has their speakers. There's the sound bars. There's, it's hopefully it's just going to get better and better, and out there more and more. I'm longing for the day when you can, I remember years ago with the 5.1, you could go to Best Buy or whatever and buy a 5.1 system in a box, and it was a few $100. The speakers were small or whatever, but I'd love to be able to go buy an Atmos system in a box for $1,000 and set it up in a room and watch cool movies.
Velcro the speakers to the ceiling and have them all Wi-Fi together. And
that's the other thing is the technology's better now, so we have wireless speakers and Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and you don't necessarily have to run copper throughout your whole house. So, a sound bar and some satellite speakers does a pretty good job.
Yeah.
And if somebody would come up with a system where you can add to it, that would be even great. You get the sound bar and a couple satellite speakers, and then you go to your friend's house and he's got 4 speakers, and you go, oh wow, if I only had 2 more speakers. So you buy 2 more speakers and you set them up. And you go, oh, if I only had 2 up there. Well, then you put 2 up there.
Isn't that called Sonos?
Would be great. Yeah, but they don't do exactly that yet.
Right.
Yeah.
More questions.
Okay.
This one is sort of slightly off topic, but I think Steve could help with this. Rob Killen says, "Love the Studio Rats content. Any tip for intermediate players?" He's obviously, I'm guessing he's a guitar player, trying to get the most out of their practice setup. Any sound deadening to the room to improve things? Have you got any tips on that, Steve?
I don't sit around. I haven't picked up a guitar in years.
What about sound deadening and stuff?
Sound deadening? Are you trying to keep sound in or keep sound out?
So, for example, at a Capitol, would you, if you had guitar? I know you normally put guitar in a booth, don't you, Jen?
Yeah. Well, depending on what it is, yeah.
But if the guitarist is in the room, are you going to put gobos around the amp, or are you just going to?
Yeah.
It depends on what else is in the room. So if I'm just doing guitar overdubs, I probably wouldn't do that. I would, put him out there and let him crank it up as loud as he wants, and maybe stick a room mic out there to mute later. But if I have to record with the guitar isolated, I try to get it into kind of a dead space. I don't want, that boxy sound you get from booths sometimes. Try to keep the mics fairly close to the amp. Although I don't bury it in the cone, I'll leave a good few inches between the front of the amp and the mic. But yeah, I mean, as far as a player, practice, get good, get good at what you're bad at. Figure out what you're bad at and fix it.
That is a good.
That's pretty much the amen rule, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and from my point of view as an engineer, I'm always happy when guitar players come in and they're prepared, and their equipment works and it doesn't buzz and they have all the right cables and they have their own batteries and I don't have to screw around with any of that stuff.
What? A guitarist meant to have equipment that works and batteries and stuff. I thought that was your job.
Yeah, right. Yeah, my job is getting rid of the ground loop.
Okay, next question. Hi there at the Studio Rats. Questions for Steve. What got him into recording, schooling? What view on future of recording? Thanks. Big fan of your work. So, what got you into recording? What school, training, that sort of stuff, and view on future.
What got me into recording is being a really horrible guitar player. And realizing I was never good enough to be in the band and all that kind of stuff. But my friends were in the band, so I wanted to hang out and do all that. And I figured the guy in the back, he just stood there and pushed buttons. I could do that, And then once I kind of delved into it a little bit, it was really interesting to me. So I actually did go to one of the early recording schools. It was a 2-year program. And I mean, I've told this story a million times. I won't go into the details, but I was, 6 months into this program and ended up getting a job at a studio called Cherokee, which is no longer there, and realized very quickly I was learning more at the studio than I was at school. And again, this was a very early recording school. The schools nowadays are much different. But the school was great. At least it gave me, coming in as a guy who knew nothing. I mean, I didn't have the 4-track as a kid and record myself and all that kind of stuff. So I really knew nothing. So it was a really great way to, I had like the book learning, like this is what a compressor does. This is what an EQ does. This is signal flow. And then I could go to the studio and see it in action. And I ended up not finishing the program because, again, I was learning more at the studio at that time. So I just dove in and then came up, the traditional studio system as a runner and an assistant engineer and all that kind of stuff. So, there was another part to that.
Yeah.
Future recording.
Yeah.
I'm sitting in it.
Well, I think we all are. I think we're all in what is going to be. Yeah. Certainly at the moment, it's not just the future; it's the current. It's
home time.
Yeah.
I mean, the good news is there's always going to be recording because if people need music, or whatever. It's not always just music. I think there's always going to be a place for the big studios. We may not need a lot of them, but we're always going to need a few of them. Yeah. And we're always going to need people to run them, and somebody has to be really good at it. So
you can learn it off YouTube, though. It's all.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Good luck. Yeah. The problem I always, there was always that thing of like, you just get the box and you twiddle the knobs until it sounds good.
Pretty much how it works.
And my thought was always, well, how do you know when it sounds good?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
That's the hard part. That's the part that you have to learn is what sounds good. I mean, when I walk into a big band session and I push the mics up and I hear the horns, I immediately know whether I like it or not because I've heard it a million times, and I heard it not when I was doing it. I heard it when I was the runner, standing in the back of the room and somebody like Al pushed the mics up and I went, ooh, and that was it. Well, I have that stuck in my head. So, what kind of snare, drum sound do you want? When you push the faders up, you go, oosh, or you push the faders up and you go, oh, okay, this is gonna be good today, but if you don't have that in your head, that, I don't know, even, that
a reference, isn't it? A
reference point. Yeah. Then you can twiddle all the knobs you want and you're just gonna be twiddling knobs.
Do you think you learn though do you think it's impossible to learn without making the mistakes?
No, I don't think it's impossible. But it takes longer.
Yeah.
The nice thing about coming up in a studio is I could watch other people make mistakes too.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily my mistake. I could watch 4 or 5 mistakes in one day that I didn't have to make.
Yeah.
We always used to joke as an assistant, sometimes you learn more from the bad engineers than you do from the good engineers.
Yeah.
Or somebody else's mistake or, the way another guy treated the musicians or whatever it was, a inexperienced producer who did something wrong, and then you have that in your head, all right, don't ever do that. That's a bad thing. So
I love one of your stories and traits is always the most important thing of the day is what's for lunch.
Yeah, that's what I always say. The two most important parts of any recording session, the headphone mix and the lunch order. Because if those go south, man, the whole thing goes.
So true.
Yeah. Good headphone mix. That's key.
Yes. Paul's seen me suffer with bad headphones in a studio that should know better.
He's such a diva. He's such a diva.
Yeah. And the headphone
mix. Sorry, I just
mix,
want to hear the drums,
A good headphone mix is not always the record.
What's that?
A good headphone mix doesn't always sound like a record either.
Very true.
So it has to be tailored to what you're doing. I kind of miss the days when we used to have two mixes. Like one had a lot of vocal and one had no vocal, and that was it. You let the band fight it out for the first minute of the session, and then they get over it and just play. But it was funny because you could before everybody had their own mixers and everything. We could actually if a singer was singing out of tune, we could subtly adjust the headphone mix a little bit and get them to pull in a little more. Whether raising them up or down or, a little more bass or stuff like that. And, they wouldn't even know we were doing it and we could do it. And nowadays, everybody's got all these mixers and all this control and you have no idea what the hell they're listening to.
That's so true. Another question. Safey says, I'm guessing he's talking about Atmos. Yes, he is. Okay, 2 heavy guitars, dense, diesel, and rectifier amplifiers, all to bridge. What does Atmos especially? Okay, yeah. What does Atmos bring to heavy gain guitars? What can you do with?
Well, you can make them huge for one.
Yeah.
I actually mixed an Alter Bridge track. I don't know if it ever came out. I mean, you can get some really. I mean, you can make it feel like you're like inside the guitar amp. It's really quite fun. And those records are usually cool because there's usually a few different elements, so you can have rather than stack of guitars left and stack of guitars right, you can kind of stack them back also. But everything in Atmos is dependent on the song and what's there. So I always say one of the hardest things to mix in Atmos is like a 4-piece rock band.
Yeah,
because it's not doing very much. Yeah, and there's nothing to split out, and we make it work, but that's harder than a pop tune that's got 100 tracks on it, and most of it is crap that can be floating around the room anyways because it's not necessary.
Yeah, Paul.
But those can be fun. I've pulled apart a bunch of records that, oh, wow, I never even heard that keyboard. You can't, I'm listening and like, man, you can't hear that part in the stereo mix. There's just so much crap. So I just take it and put it back there and now you can hear it. It was in there, but, I use a lot less EQ and compression in Atmos because you're not fighting for space.
Yeah.
You don't have to carve guitars out. You just move them. And, you don't have to, there's essentially no bus compression. I mean, we have ways around it, but it doesn't really do the same thing anyways. Trying to use bus compression on an entire room doesn't work the same as using it in a stereo element. I mean, think of it if you've ever mixed anything in mono, compression in mono works different than compression in stereo. And in Atmos and multi-channel, it's even expanded even more. So we don't try to kind of beat stuff up that way anymore.
So you don't have mastering as such for Atmos?
Not I mean, we do, but it's not the same kind of thing. I mean, for us, mastering is more assembling an album and putting it together and making sure that one song isn't loud, which is what mastering is anyways, really. But it's much more subtle. There isn't the idea that the mastering engineer is going to change something. It's more an assembly process for us. I mean, we have numbers we try to hit for our streaming services, and we do that when we're mixing, so that we're not delivering mixes that are too loud or too soft. We're all about in the same range. The nice part about the whole Atmos thing was because at the start of it, there were only 2 or 3 of us doing it. We kind of made the standards up ourselves, which, I mean, there are some standards that Dolby has, standard practices that were literally me and Carrie in a room going, all right, what are we going to do? We need a standard. Okay, let's make one up. So we did,
Someone's got to be first.
Exactly. So if you don't like the loudness standard, you can partially blame me.
Can you tell the audience about your biggest show of the year, and what happens with the Oscars? Because I remember you telling this story once to us, and I thought it was fascinating.
The Academy Awards, darling. The Academy Awards.
The Academy Awards. Well, traditionally, we'll see what happens this year. I have a feeling it's going to be different this year. But for the last 20 some years, so the week before the Oscars, so the Oscars is on a Sunday, always. The week before, we have the entire orchestra at Capitol, and they take the whole place, all 3 rooms, and we rehearse everything. We pre-record pretty much everything. We rehearse the artists that come in to sing the songs. Some things have to be, are actually pre-recorded on the show. Not much of the show is pre-recorded, but a lot of it is. Some stuff is pre-recorded to have in case there's a disaster. But basically, yeah, we have the whole. It's about depending on the year, it's anywhere from a 55 to 65 piece orchestra, which is rhythm section, big band horns, orchestral woodwinds, strings, 3 percussionists. I mean, because it's the Oscars, you have to cover. You could be covering anything from, the Lego Movie and Pharrell to a John Williams Star Wars score. And we have to be able to do everything in between that. So, it's a really fun gig. Tommy Vicari is the lead mixer on it, and I've been doing it with him. Like I said, I think last year was my 21st year or something like that. But it's really great. We have the whole band, and we set them up like a recording session and record everything. And then the artists come in and sing their songs. It's usually the first time they've heard, because the arrangement for the show is, a 2.5 minute version of whatever their song is with a big orchestra and all that kind of stuff. So usually they haven't heard it. So we have to make sure that they like it and they've heard it. And, we record it and give them a copy of it to practice to. They have to sing it live. Nobody lip syncs on the Oscars. It's all live. But we do a recording of it, so they have it for camera blocking and rehearsals and stuff like that. And then there was a few years there where so what happens is we record like till Thursday, and then the orchestra moves over to the venue, and they take everything we did at Capitol and jam it into an orchestra pit and a couple of remote trucks, and do the show live from there. But there were a few years in there where the orchestra pit was unavailable because of staging and that kind of stuff. So we have fiber lines that run from Capitol to the Dolby Theater, which is about a half mile down Hollywood Boulevard. And we actually did the show live, I think 3 times, so the orchestra was playing the show live. Everything was live the way it normally would be, except that the orchestra was a half a mile away at Capitol. And yeah, it was really fun to do. I loved it. I thought it was fantastic. But I think we were down to about a 3 millisecond delay, and the delay didn't really matter anyways because the music only going one way. We play the music, they hear it on stage. We would feed it to the broadcast truck, we would feed it to the front of house engineer, we would feed it to the monitor engineer, and so everything ran as if that band was sitting, below the stage in the orchestra pit. We had video monitors and cues and all that kind of stuff, and it was great. It was really fun. Those were my favorite. Wow. My favorite years. Yeah, it was great.
Wow. I'm also going to say that you, not single-handedly, I'm not going to pin that on you, you ruined my holiday.
How did I do that? I wasn't there.
That's probably why.
So there was a little movie that came out.
Oh yeah,
a little while ago, and
but I did the cool version.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that's the one my son wants to listen to.
Right on.
So you better tell everyone what it is.
I am talking about Frozen 2.
Yes.
And the Panic at the Disco outro song, which Jake thinks is Christoph singing, which it isn't. It's the guys from Panic at the Disco. But I always get Daddy, play Christoph singing Into the Gnome.
Nice.
So now this of course was exacerbated by the fact that we went into a supermarket to buy something, and Lucy saw an Elsa doll, like a figure, like an action figure type thing, and I said, "Yeah, okay, you can if you want that. If you want that with your holiday money, you can have the doll, and you know it can be your toy for this week." We get it into the car. She takes it out of the box and squeezes it, and I hear "Into the Unknown," and I'm like, "Oh no!"
Yeah, you can't escape it. Welcome to having children. Yeah. I always wondered if I had in my career if I've actually spent more money at Disney or made more money off Disney. I'm guessing it's spent more money.
But the funny thing was, I seem to remember us talking about you doing that recording with Panic at the Disco, and then talking about the soundtrack. And there's one song on it, which is a Christoph song called "Into the Woods."
Right.
And we had it on the Apple Music or the iTunes playlist. And I thought, this really reminds me of something. Like, really reminds me of something. And it's "You're the Inspiration," Chicago. Yeah. And it's so the same.
Yeah, it took us about a week to figure it out here too, what it was, once I actually saw the movie. Yeah. You would have loved that Panic at the Disco session though, because it was 2 drummers playing live.
Wow.
Yeah, we had 2 kids. It was kind of fun because there were 2 kits set up, and they brought down 2 kits. And we set them both up in the room, just in Studio A, literally right next to each other.
Wow!
And was Brendan Urie recording at the same time? Was it when it was just him? Because it used to be a band, didn't it? Now it's Panic at Disco is really just him.
We did this with the band.
Oh, with the whole band. Oh, awesome.
Yeah. But he played. He's a great drummer. So it was him, and then I can't remember the guy who plays drums. So basically, they were out there screwing around, and both playing at the same time. And me and the producer looked at each other and went, well, let's just do that. So I just mic'd up both kits. And so that's actually 2 drummers playing at the same time. And we did very little editing, very little punching. It was just a huge sound. So, and then we did...
It's all toms and kick drums. It's not a lot of cymbals and kind of ridey type stuff. It's all
it's just bashing, yeah.
Yeah,
exactly.
It sounds awesome.
So I think when they brought that in, they kind of had the track cut, like the vocals were done and, but it was all cut with machines for the most part. So they brought it in, and in I think it might have been one day. It was like we did drums for 3 hours, then they struck the drums, and we did bass overdubs for an hour, and then struck the bass, and then we did guitar overdubs for a couple hours, and then the horn players came in, and we did that, and then the string players came in, and then we were done. I mean, I think it was all one day, to be quite honest.
So you didn't mix it. You didn't mix that one.
I didn't mix it. No.
Thank God for that, because I was about to shoot you for the auto tune at the end on his vocal.
Yeah, that wasn't me. That was done before me. But the funny part is I have a credit on Frozen 1, the original Frozen, and people kept asking me about it. And I'd be doing stuff like this and be like, what was it like working on Frozen? I, to this day, have no idea what I did. No clue. But at that point, it was a Disney session. We do them all the time. It's the same people. It's the head of production, and so, and it Frozen, it was nothing at the time. It wasn't a movie yet, so I'm not going to remember every single little. I mean, unless it's a title you're familiar with or that is coming, it was probably a background vocal session or something weird like that. But to this day, I have no idea what I did on the original Frozen. Somebody told me it was vocals on the whatever that song was, the first annoying song. Let It Go.
Let It Go.
Yeah. But I don't remember.
You didn't actually wreck my holiday. Just any moment when we got in the car.
Yeah. But again, at least it's a better version. It's a cool version.
It is actually. There's another version. There's a version. I can't remember the guy's name, and I apologize to him if he actually gets to see this, but it's a big band version.
Ooh.
And it's got Greg Bissonette on drums.
Okay.
It's basically a kind of a transatlantic big band, and there's this guy trumpeter who takes the vocal line as the lead, and it's awesome. I'll send you a link. I mean, it is really, really good. I mean, it's basically the great and the good of kind of the National Youth Jazz Orchestra set big band, what is basically the London session horn guys.
Right.
And I can't remember the name of the guitarist. It's got bass player's awesome as well. But Greg, it starts with Greg Bisonet on drums, and I'm like, well, this is going to be good. And then it kicks into the Unknown, and I'm like, okay, didn't see that coming.
Sometimes, hey, if Greg,
was on it, I'm sure it's great. It's the Panic at the Disco version, the big Into the Unknown. I promise not to do that again.
Yeah, please. There's more questions.
Okay.
Rob Killian says, I see some notes in an interview with Steve about a regimented process for dialing in a tune. I'm all about repeatable processes. What else can you add? Any order of operations? Best practice.
That might have been the one that you and I did, Steve, for Product Expert.
I don't know, maybe. I mean, I assume he's talking about, templates and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I don't really have a regiment for dialing in a mix. I mean, I guess there's certain, like anybody, there's certain things I gravitate to. If I'm starting a mix, if it's something that I haven't been involved in the recording of, it's a lot different. If I've been involved in the recording, I already kind of know what's there and where the bodies are buried, and I can throw the faders up pretty quick and get going. If it's something that I'm being sent to mix, then I always like to get a rough mix, and I'll kind of listen to the rough mix and try to figure out what the kind of basis, the backbone of the song is, where the groove is, that kind of stuff, and I'll start there. If it's a vocal and an acoustic guitar with some stuff around it, I'm going to start with that vocal and acoustic guitar and make sure that that's the fourth. If it's a poppy R&B thing, I'm probably going to start with the bass and drums. I have a template I start from, but my template is just a little bit of routing and some effects that show up. I don't have, a vocal chain or a bass chain or obviously I have stuff that I gravitate to, but I don't have anything that just shows up in a template. Every mix is different that way. I mean, again, outside of the 6 or 7 reverbs that I start with, and those may change a little bit too.
But you do one interesting thing, which you put everything into a bus, don't you?
Yeah. So
everything goes into a bus before it then hits a group.
Well, it goes to like a stereo bus. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that I can do any kind of bus processing, which the funny part is the more I mix, the less bus processing I use. I use a little bit of compression and a tiny bit of EQ and, maybe a limiter on the back end if it's one song and I need to push it a little harder for something. And then I may take that off before it goes to mastering. But I don't do like a lot of people do like subgroups. I don't have a bass bus and a drum bus and a vocal bus and a guitar bus and all that kind of stuff. I very rarely do that. I may do it in certain instances if I have, a shit ton of background vocals. I'll probably get them down to one fader, and one compressor, something like that. But I don't mix through buses like that. I might parallel compress drums or something like that, in which case I would send them to a bus. But that workflow of having individual buses that then feed a common stereo bus, like I very rarely use a master fader, stuff like that. Because I also like to print my mix in the session. I very rarely will do a bounce to disc.
And you do that? You do that because just in case someone goes, look, I love the verse from that, but I prefer the chorus from this mix. So you can easily just chop and change and.
I can, yeah. Or if I just need to, can you bring the vocal up a half a dB in the bridge? I can just go into my session and, pop it into the bridge. Now, the caveat for this is if I'm mixing in the box, which is like 99% of what I do now. And also if I'm mixing in stereo. If I'm doing a film or a video game or something like that, where I have to deliver multiple stems, like I have a video game. I mixed the music for this game called Apex Legends, which is a pretty popular game right now, and I'm constantly delivering, 10 or 12 stems for every single piece of music. So I have a template for that that's pretty extensive as far as, bussing and reverbs and master faders and, group faders with limiters on them. And so that I can just take the multi-track they send me and lop it right on the top of this thing and assign everything to the appropriate stem, and then, I hit record and all my stems print at one time. And that took me the better part of a day to just build the template. It's pretty crazy, actually. And if you're doing big film mixes, it's the same way. You don't have time to stop and play everything single stem out individually. If we're doing an album project, and nowadays almost every album requires stems, we'll mix the song and then I'll just mute everything but the bass and run the bass, and mute everything but the drums and run the drums, and mute everything, and it's a tedious way to do it. But in the long run, sometimes it's actually quicker than trying to set up this whole template.
Yeah.
To and make sure you're not crossing reverbs and all this other junk. And if you're mixing on a console, forget it. All bets are off.
So is it still fair to say that most of Al's mixes are still done the proper way with a console? And
yeah, if Al's mixing, he's on a console. The only exception to that would be the one time or two times he's done some Atmos mixing, in which case it has to be in the box. And we set him up with it. It was fine. I mean, he had no problem doing it. We ended up getting him a little S3, so he had some faders. And everything he uses hardware-wise, I had a plug-in version of, which was even, of course, now down to our capital chambers. So, so he was very comfortable. It didn't, it was just the workflow was a little different for him, but he wasn't having to figure out, when he went, can you put a summit on that? I went, yeah, no problem. And I put a summit on it. Where's my, how do I get to the 480? Here, it's right here. You do that. Great. But it sounded the same, So, I mean, it again, and even he was like, it's just, the button's in a different place. And that was not frustrating to him, but that was what slowed him down a little bit till he figured out where it was. And then he was fine, so, but the majority of stuff, he's comfortable on a console, and there's no reason for him to change, and it sounds great. So why change,
I got questions. Well, why in Capital are you guys? I mean, I think I know the answer to this question, but why have you got like Neve consoles in there as opposed to like an API or an SSL or is it just a preference?
They sound fantastic.
Right.
Yeah, we've always had Neves. I mean, I think our client base expects us to have them. The old Neve in Studio B, the old 8068, it's actually, I've been told it's serial number 1. At least the first 32 channels of it are. I was talking to Robin at Neve one day, and we figured that the one we have, the 8068 we have, and I think it's the 8068 at Air, are the only 2 80 series Neve consoles that are in their original home. Which is,
wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, we've always been a Neve house. And then when we were looking, we had the VRs, and when we were looking to replace those, the 88R was already there, and it did everything we needed it to do. Sounds good. We've never been big SSL fans. I mean, I understand why people use them. I understand why they like them. It just never did what I wanted it to do. I think they're a little aggressive for some of the music we do. It's not really, they're not really set up for orchestral recording and stuff like that. The other thing about the 88Rs is, they are set up for mixing in surround and 7.1. They're fully automated, so it just really worked out with the Neves. Yeah, I mean, at one point we did have a little API. We had a 16-channel API that we would just roll around when we needed to. So, and we have all kinds of mic preamps and stuff like that. So, if you want an SSL bus compressor, you just go to the closet and pull the SSL bus compressor out. But it's all there. So if you want to, rack APIs, just go get the rack of APIs. So we're kind of spoiled. I mean, I know I'm spoiled.
Yes, understatement of how many 67s, 57s, and 47s?
46. We have 16 of the old, original 67s. Plus now we have 2 of the new ones on loan, which are fantastic, by the way. I love the new ones. We have half a dozen U48s, which is basically a U47, but the patterns are different. Yeah, we got hundreds of microphones, literally hundreds and hundreds.
What's the crappiest bit of gear that's in the gear cupboard?
Oh, we got a lot of crappy gear.
Have you?
Yeah. Sometimes you have to get your old Alesis MIDI verb out for, SPX90 for that crazy SPX90 sound. So one piece of gear I can't come to sell is my SPX90. I haven't even seen it in years, but I won't sell it. Yeah, we got some cheap mics. You know, sometimes a 57 is still the best thing you could ever want. You know, but yeah, there's some gear in there that's broken, and you know, old vocal stressors and stuff like that. And, you know, it's funny. The vocal stressor, Joe Ciccarelli told me, he said anything that says, like, if the piece of gear says vocal stressor or vocal, he goes, never use it on a vocal. If it says drum compressor, don't ever use it on the drums. Like, use it on something else.
I think we were wandering around with you one day, and we noticed that in the tech room, they've all got old 002 and 003 interfaces set up.
Yeah, because that's what they use to for testing and stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, how old are those things? I bet they've not got an original component left in them.
Who knows? Or they haven't been touched in ever. You know, depends on whose desk it's at. You know, the fun part is we still have all that old gear. You know, even the stuff that was crap. I mean, at times we do get rid of gear, but it's usually like, you know, at one point we had just a stack of drummer gates. You know, because in the 80s and 90s, I mean, every studio had to have, you know, a dozen drummer gates. So we had like 25 drummer gates, and you know, we kept like 6 of them and traded the rest in for something interesting.
Yeah.
So, but you know, we still got old ribbon mics that never get used and stuff like that. It's all there. Somebody wants it.
Put me down for it.
You haven't got enough gear.
Put it in a container. No, you can never have too much gear. Sorry, that was me. Did I say that out loud?
Yeah.
Was it did my brain actually make my mouth work just then for a change?
I'm going to start renting storage space to him.
No, I've already got one, and that's another sore point. Steve, I appreciate that it's getting on. It's the hour ticketh by and all that sort of stuff.
Is it? Wow, it did go by.
I know it's amazing how it flies. It flies. Thank you, mate, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, the pleasure is always all ours. I'd love to see you in January, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Unless you're coming out to go to Disneyland.
Is it? Oh, it is open, but it's all.
I don't know.
Shame.
No. I think we'll give it a miss for this year, but hopefully we'll see you at some point very soon.
Summer now.
Summer now.
Yeah.
Next summer now.
You never
Let's
know.
go to Nashville and celebrate over there or something.
Yeah.
Thank you out there in internet land for joining us. And for those of you who weren't live are watching this after the event, you know where we are. 8 p.m. BST for the time being, and soon to be turned into GMT again. But hey, it's 8 p.m. British Summer Time on YouTube and Facebook Live. We've got no idea who next week's guest is, because quite frankly, we're not that organised.
We're not. Are we?
Could be me. I'll get that Wednesday morning email. Oh shit, we don't have anybody.
We're trying to get organised. We are trying. Very.
We are.
So thank you once again, everyone. We hope to see you. If not during the week, we'll see you next Wednesday for some more Q&A live. Take care, everyone.
You guys.
Thanks for having me.